Hello, and welcome back to my channel, Civil War Reports. I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. And today I'm going to continue on with my series on causes of the American Civil War. We are up to the 1832 Nullification Crisis, where South Carolina threatened to not only nullify a federal law, but also threaten secession. And the main source for today's episode comes from this great book. Often, I believe it's completely overlooked in terms of great books on the American Civil War. It's called The History of the Confederacy, 1832 to 1865, by Clifford Doughty, D-O-W-D-E-Y. One of the very first books I've ever read on the American Civil War, and to me, it really was a classic. So, the episode I was hoping to do, unfortunately, the weather is not cooperating, but if the weather will clear up, I'm hoping to get that episode done. It's a special report I'm doing and get it up to you before Christmas time. And let's hope. We had some snow yesterday here in the Gettysburg area. Made the place look really, really beautiful, I gotta say. Gettysburg at Christmas looks really beautiful, and then add the element of some fresh snow, and you got a beautiful little town. But anyway, we're up to the Nullification Crisis of 1832 in terms of causes of the American Civil War. So let's take a look at it. What was the Nullification Crisis, and how did we almost have civil war in 1832 as opposed to 1861? Well, when I was teaching at the college level, I really enjoyed this topic because it showed two things: just how much the South was really, or at least particularly South Carolina at this time, in favor of states' rights, and it kind of poked a few holes in the belief that the Civil War was really only about slavery and not about states' rights. I want to take a moment here. When I was teaching at the college level, and I was teaching at a college in New York, I kind of ran afoul a little bit in terms of my beliefs in what the Civil War was about. I was supposed to really just teach that it was all about slavery and nothing else, and not about the states' rights issue. And yeah, some of my fellow professors who were tenured, and I was just an adjunct, I was only part-time, tried to persuade me into changing my thinking. But as I said, this channel is about the accurate telling of the American Civil War story, and to say it was just about slavery and only about slavery is not accurate. So, let's talk about the Nullification Crisis. What happened? The Nullification Crisis, well, how did it come about? What was it? And what was the end result? Well, in 1831, it was proposed that there'd be a tariff on imported clothes, particularly from England. Now, here's the situation, or here was the situation. Cotton was grown in the South, but there really weren't that many textile mills in the South. Most of them were located in New England, Massachusetts. And so raw cotton was exported from the South up to points in the North, like Massachusetts. Some of it was sent, large quantity actually was sent to New York City, which was then transported over to England. Now, in an effort to try to protect the textile mills in the North, and also to kind of stick it to the South, because they needed clothes to for their slaves to wear. I mean, the slaves were not going to be running around the plantations naked. Well, in an effort to protect the North, really against the South, a tariff was proposed on imported textile and clothes from England, particularly. And it was actually cheaper, believe it or not, to send American cotton, raw cotton, across the Atlantic Ocean to England, have it turned into clothes there, and ship it back than it was to have that raw cotton made into clothing in the North. So in an effort to try to protect American business interests at the expense of the South, there was a tariff imposed upon imported clothes. Again, most of these were clothes that the Southerners would give to their slaves to wear. And that created a problem. And South Carolina led the way in terms of trying to nullify this federal law, to nullify this federal tariff. So we have this showdown between the business interests of the North versus the plantation owners of the South. Now, this starts in 1831. It really comes to a head in 1832. Keep in mind in 1832 that there's also going to be a presidential election that year. In 1831, who's the president of the United States? Andrew Jackson. Who's the vice president? John C. Calhoun. Interesting, both were South Carolinians. Andrew Jackson was a South Carolinian by birth. He would make his name for himself and his fortune in Tennessee, but nevertheless, he's born in South Carolina. And John C. Calhoun was a South Carolinian, and he would later go on to represent South Carolina in the Senate. But 1832 rolls around, and this crisis is coming to a head. Now, John C. Calhoun is an interesting character here. He really is. He is Vice President of the United States, and he's from South Carolina. But at first, he's very much a nationalist. He's Vice President of the United States, and he has aspirations of being the next president of the United States. So he's kind of, in a way, in the beginning, caught between a rock and a hard place. He needs to represent, in his mind, his people from his own state of South Carolina, who are very much trying to nullify this tariff. And it does come down to a states' rights issue. Does an individual state have the right to nullify a federal law if the people of that state deem the federal law to be detrimental to the state? Now, you got to keep in mind here that America is not a very old country at this point in time. Country was founded in July 4th, 1776. The country is younger than Andrew Jackson, but the question of states' rights at that point was as old as the United States itself. Remember, during the War of 1812, almost all of New England wanted, or at least toyed around with the idea of seceding from the Union during that war because they were opposed to it. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, look up the Hartford Conference during the War of 1812, and you'll see exactly what I mean. So the question remains, does the state, any state, have the right to nullify a federal law if that federal law is deemed by the people of that state to be harmful to the state? It was a great question, one to which not too many people had an answer for. And so John C. Calhoun is sort of caught up in the moment. He's a nationalist. He wants to be president of the United States one day, but he also feels he has a duty to represent the people of his particular state, even though he's vice president of all of the United States. And thus he becomes the undeclared spokesperson for nullification. And the people of South Carolina even talked about secession in regard to this issue of nullification of these tariffs that they felt were detrimental to the state of South Carolina. So what happens? And where does the President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, fit in to this crisis that's at hand? South Carolina was, without a doubt, to use a military term, rattling some sabers here. Well, and this is why I say it kind of pokes holes in the belief that the war was only about slavery, because here we have a real crisis on our hand. South Carolina is threatening to leave the Union. So what happens? Well, nobody really knows what Andrew Jackson is thinking. And if you want to read up on an American president who is a tough nut to understand, read up on Andrew Jackson. Well, nobody knows exactly how he stands on this issue until there's a dinner in Washington. Big dinner. President is there, vice president is there, and Andrew Jackson raises his glass to toast the occasion. And this is what he says, and this is quoting Andrew Jackson. "Our Union, it must be preserved." That's all he said. And at that moment, we knew exactly where Andrew Jackson stood on the issue of nullification and on the issue of secession. The Union must be preserved. To which John C. Calhoun replied with his own toast, in which John C. Calhoun said, quote, "To our Union, next to our liberties, most dear," end quote. So you could use whatever metaphor you want. The die was cast, the line was drawn in the sand, but there was now a showdown in the executive branch between the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States. And Andrew Jackson let it be known that he was going to, as Commander-in-Chief and as a man who swore to defend the Constitution, that he was going to keep the Union preserved. Now, Andrew Jackson, born in South Carolina, made his fortune in Tennessee. Both states would be part of the Confederacy during the American Civil War. Why did he take this stance? Well, he was a slave owner, no doubt about it. In fact, he owned, I think at one point, 140 slaves. But to him, this issue was not about slavery, even though the tariff was put in place by Northerners as an effort to hurt Southern slave owners. Andrew Jackson, you must remember, came from nothing. He, by all accounts, should be just somebody lost to history. But it was because of the United States of America that he went on to become a general, a war hero, President of the United States, plantation owner, a very wealthy man. He owes all of that to the United States of America. And he, even though a Southern slave owner, was not going to let America fall apart under his watch. Jackson is not in favor of secession. John C. Calhoun, in protest, will resign as Vice President of the United States. And as I mentioned earlier, he would eventually become Senator for South Carolina. Now, Jackson was not playing games. Jackson did not speak if he didn't mean it. And he said he was quite prepared to send 50,000 troops into South Carolina to squash the talk of secession. He also sent warships down into Charleston Bay. Charleston Harbor. So he was serious. Two things happen at this point in time. First, South Carolina begins to look around to see if they have any supporters, any allies in other states. And 1832 was not 1861. They looked around and there was really no other southern state that was ready to go as far as secession. So they realized they had no supporters. Also, Henry Clay, the gentleman who does earn the historic title of the Great Compromiser, steps in and offers a compromise that helps South Carolina save face and also keeps peace with the northern business interest. And that is, there's an agreement to the tariff, but at a much lower rate than what was originally proposed. So Civil War is avoided, at least in 1832. And we could only imagine, we could do what ifs, what would have happened had South Carolina followed through on its thread, or Henry Clay never came up with a compromise solution. And would that have ended any talk of secessionism and civil war? We can only guess. We can only guess. But what we do know is that this was a serious crisis. The President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, was prepared to take America to war, to squash the idea of Civil War in 1832. So by beginning of 1833, March of 1833, a compromise is reached, Civil War avoided, and South Carolina remains in the Union for at least 28, 29 more years before we have the real American Civil War. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, it's part of the series of bringing causes of the Civil War to you. I really enjoy talking about these topics. We're going to continue over time to look at the various events that took place that led us up to the final break and secession in 1861. And if I don't post an episode before December 25th, I just want to say to everyone out there, Merry Christmas. Please continue to watch for a few more minutes, as I have a special announcement that I want to make to all of you loyal viewers out there. Thank you, and may 2025 be a better year than 2024 for all of us. Merry Christmas. Thank you for watching, and until next time, please, let's keep the history alive. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode. It was a pleasure bringing it to you, as it's been a pleasure to bring each and every episode this year to you. This may be my last episode for Civil War Reports in the year 2024. And I hope that you enjoyed the episodes I brought you this year, and that I will continue to earn your loyalty on the American Civil War into year 2025. As 2024 is drawing to a close, there may be some of you out there that are unsure of a charity to make a donation to before the end of this year. And there are many, many great charities out there that do require donations from people like you and myself. But if you are on the fence about a charity to donate to, please let me make a suggestion. My personal favorite charity is St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. Why? Well, there's numerous reasons. One, cancer, and I know firsthand, is a nasty, nasty disease. And it could tear families apart and cause incredible pain and hardship. Almost 3 years ago, I heard those words, "You've got cancer." And luckily it was caught early because I had no symptoms. I just made an appointment for a routine annual physical, and thankfully my doctor was paying attention. He saw my PSA numbers were going up, told me to go to a specialist. Long story short, prostate cancer. But it was caught early. But fighting cancer, even at the early stages, is a very rough battle. And it was hard enough as an adult to hear those words, "You've got cancer." It's got to be absolutely devastating for an adult to hear those words about their child. It's got to be nothing worse than a child having to deal with this life-threatening illness. And in my opinion, this is why St. Jude's, I think, does the most good, is the research they do, they share that information with other doctors. What they do, not only for children, will help adults as well. And I'm not a paid spokesman for St. Jude. They don't even know I'm making this video. So it's not because there's some financial reward for me saying this. This is what I truly believe. And also, if you are a parent who has heard those horrible words about your child and you travel to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, your expenses, your travel expenses, your lodging will be paid for by St. Jude's, by the donations that folks like you and I make. And that is a great thing because, again, it's hard enough fighting cancer as an adult. It's absolutely got to be absolutely devastating to hear those words about your child. And to think that your travel expenses will be paid for, it's one less thing for you to worry about. That's a great thing. So in the description below, I will leave the address where you can send donations to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. I'm going to be making my Christmas donation before this week is out. So if you're on the fence, you're not sure about a charity to donate to before the end of the year, please consider St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. Thank you. I hope to see you in 2025. And for you and your family, have a Merry Christmas, and let's hope 2025 is better than 2024. And if you like what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up. Also, notify your friends. Let them know about this channel and ask them to subscribe as well. If you like, you may leave a question or a comment below, and perhaps I will answer your question in a future episode of Civil War Reports. Until next time, please keep the history alive.